Hello everyone, it's Rafael Gutierrez. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about bullying and pretty much a lot of other things. One of the first things I'm going to mention is why I didn't make a couple videos last week. And it has to do with my birthday was last week, so I decided to take some time off. And usually in my birthday, I tend to reflect on my life, where I've been, where I'm going, where I am. I also tend to look at the world, where it's been, where it is, and where it's going. And together, I tend to come out with the idea of pretty much my life and what's going to happen. Now, I usually like to talk about when I first came to the U.S. I was I was born in the U.S. but left and we came back. And so I was the son of immigrant parents who ended up making themselves a life here. They moved here from Nicaragua. They started their own business. They sent me, my brother and sister to college and grad school. I wrote a little bit about it on Off the Rails. And different things actually did happen. But the truth is, I never felt like my life was mine until I went to college. I went to San Diego State as an undergrad, and when I did that, I ended up feeling like my life was my own, but I was still trapped with the ideas of the past. What I mean is, a lot of the stuff that I believed was true because of what I had learned in pretty much up until high school kept me in a type of prison where I couldn't see beyond what I thought I knew. And my life actually got better in college, and then I left college, went to grad school. And again, my life progressively got better. And I finished med school, and after med school, my life continued to get better. And then I ended up getting a stagnation. And I had a problem in that whenever I reach a stagnation, I have an issue where I don't know why, but I'd rather be moving one way or another. It could be getting worse or better. But if things stay exactly the way they are, I tend to feel lost. I feel trapped. And so I've made a lot of mistakes because of that. And I say that, but at the same time, I look at where I am right now. I have a wonderful girlfriend who really much supports anything I do, encourages me to try things that I think maybe this isn't a good idea. She tends to say, look, try it. Why not? Who knows what's going to happen with that? We have a place that we love. We live in San Diego, about a mile from the beach. And so we have a really good life. Could be better, and it is, but it is getting better, and that's actually one of the big things. Well, then I actually also take a look at the world. Now, I'm only going to talk about the big time periods up until I get to roughly the time period I kind of was alive. So, but if you actually start looking long before I was here, at medieval times, and especially medieval Europe, what you see a world trapped in what they believe is real. They don't try to go beyond that because that's what's real. And what happens is it's really a horrible time to live. I mean, I usually tell people, imagine being a king during the medieval times, and your life if you live in an industrialized nation, imagine being a middle class in, let's say, the U.S. Who would you rather be, a king in medieval times or middle class in, let's say, California, San Diego? And I personally would prefer being middle class in San Diego for a lot of reasons. One is hygiene. People tend to have hygiene here. Medieval times, if you read about it, you realize that hygiene is not something that people even pay attention to. I'm really big on plumbing. I like being able to go to the bathroom and flush it, rather than if you're a medieval king, you go to the bathroom and throw it out your own window. Maybe you might have someone to take it, but it's pretty disgusting. And you then have the pretty much Renaissance. And people think, well, it was a lot better. And it was a lot better than medieval times, but you still have the sanitation problems. If you think about it, in the 1600s, there was a plague that actually went through London, and I think it killed something like 1 out of every 3 people. I could be wrong, I can't remember the exact numbers. But it wasn't until London burned down and was rebuilt that really things start getting better. And during this time period, you start getting the basics of the science of science. And with that, you end up moving out from the Renaissance and into the Age of Enlightenment. And a lot of people talk about, well, wasn't it great to live in the Renaissance? Well, if you're comparing it to medieval times, yes. But if you look at the Age of Enlightenment versus Renaissance, you might be better off there. You have more science, you have more understanding, you have a world that is more likely to see change. And change is scary, but it's a good thing. And then we get into roughly the Industrial Revolution after that. Age of Enlightenment, usually most people say it ends with the French Revolution. Industrial age starts happening, and things start getting a little better. They're still not good. I mean, if you read any of the Charles Dickens type books, you realize that this is not necessarily a great time to be alive. If you look at what's happening in the U.S. in the Industrial Revolution, you have a lot of things that weren't necessarily that good. And then you end up getting what they call the Gilded Age. It's still part of the Industrial Revolution, it seems, but you start getting electricity, you start getting more manufacturing, you actually start getting the beginning of a middle class. And a lot of people will say Ford had a big deal to do with that. And we come to the end, and we end up getting pretty much to the First World War. And, well, let's be honest, chemical warfare is pretty disgusting. We do see a dip, but things actually start coming about. Now, I actually will mention, though, something interesting that starts happening. Before we actually get into the electricity and everything like that, it's actually kind of funny, some of the things that we start seeing. Some of the ideas that in the past were considered revolutionary, now are considered obvious. Why wouldn't we have this? For instance, in the U.S. Civil War, you have the Republicans who were actually pushing to end slavery. Today, I think most civilized people would say slavery was a horrible thing and look at people who either were involved in slavery as complete monsters, and they were. The thing is, they were monsters who didn't know better. And that was actually revolutionary, ending slavery. But we still want to give people votes, right? World War I, World War II. And then we end up, after World War II, we end up having more of a middle class. And we start seeing different things happen. We do start seeing more and more civil rights. And we see a clash against it. Now, I'm actually almost next to when I was born. I was born in 1974. And one of the neat, interesting things that most people don't pay attention to is 6 years before I was born, Martin Luther King was killed. Yeah, Martin Luther King was killed in 1968. I was born in 1974. You're actually not talking about that big of a time difference. And so we do have a lot of times people think, oh, well, these civil rights things were so long ago. But when we actually look at the world, these are actually not that long ago. Like I said, Martin Luther King died 6 years before I was born, not before I did. And that's actually a big thing to think about. Now, here's the funny part. When I was born in 1974, you had what they called the Equal Education Opportunity Act, where they said you cannot discriminate anymore. You have to actually have schools that are equal in both sides, not the separate but equal. But you do have to give the same opportunities to people. It actually said something to the point where you cannot discriminate faculty or students based on age, based on religion, gender, or ethnicity. And people think, oh, well, okay, that's it, right? Well, no, we actually still see a lot of things we still saw a lot of things that were government-sponsored oppression. For instance, when I was growing up in San Jose, I remember the Castro sweeps. I didn't know what they were called, but I kind of looked this up. But I did remember in 1989, there was actually a beating of protesters by police, and the reason that they were actually beaten was because they were gay. Actually, what was interesting is in 1978, I think it was, or 1979, there was actually another thing that was interesting. There was something called the Bridge Act, which people were trying to make it illegal for people who were gay to work. This was actually, you think about it, this was actually in my lifetime. These things were things that were considered conservative. They weren't actually considered so far off left field. But one of the things I actually noticed is, as you start seeing this, those ideas that were once considered conservative usually end up as time goes on becoming obsolete or so archaic that people don't even want to deal with. I mean, seriously, imagine living in a place where the idea that someone had the right to achieve based on themselves rather than religion, who their father was not a normal idea. Imagine living in a place where someone was only successful because their parents were someone, not because they did the work that they needed to get there. And we still do have a long way to go. I mean, here's something that I found interesting, is there was an equal rights amendment that had been proposed, which has never actually been written in the Constitution. Even today, in 2020, people are still fighting over the idea that people should have the same rights, regardless of sex. And this actually does really help me go into the topic that I really want to talk about, and that's bullying. Now, before we really talk about bullying, we really have to define what bullying is. And I like to use definitions. And what I found is, what a bully is someone who seeks to do harm, intimidate, or coerce someone perceived as vulnerable. In essence, a bully is someone who finds someone they can intimidate. They can actually push to do certain things because they have some sort of power. Now, there are different types of bullies, but bullies tend to have a similar psychological makeup. It's actually kind of interesting. As I was doing this, I found that psychologists and psychiatrists had pretty much boiled down what a bully was. Usually, it was interesting because a bully doesn't necessarily see themselves as a bully. A lot of them see themselves as a protector of a status quo. What I mean by that is this: if you actually were to see a racist back in the 1960s, he would not see himself as a bully. He would see himself as someone protecting the status quo. Now we can see that this person was actually seeking to do harm, intimidate, and coerce people using fear. People who were vulnerable. People who weren't protected under the law. So a bully pretty much a lot of times doesn't see themselves as a bully. They are trying to protect as far as they can tell. And that's actually something interesting. Sometimes a bully will actually feel like they are the victim, not their victim. They get attacked because, well, I'm actually trying to protect my ideas and someone else is going against it. A lot of these people, like I said, if we use the old 60s racists, that person doesn't see themselves as a bully. They see themselves as someone who's protecting his views of the world, which makes it kind of even more dangerous and interesting. There's another thing I found that psychologists and psychiatrists tended to agree with bullying. A lot of times bullies were, for their age, immature. They actually didn't reach the same maturity level as other people in their peer groups. What I mean by that is this: you have someone who's a bully. Usually, if he was an adult, he would actually be more immature than other adults. He may actually be carrying around a high school mentality. And if you actually look at people who are bullies, you'll notice that you see that they make fun of things that people who are mature look at and think, my God, what's wrong with this person? Then there's really no other way to see it. If you have a high school bully, usually it's a person who has the mentality of someone in junior high. Someone who's in junior high would be in elementary. Someone who's in elementary would be someone with the mentality of someone in preschool. So you always have these lower mentality levels of a bully. You also have some other things. They found that a lot of bullies don't have the mental capacity to find other ways to pretty much talk about what they really want to accomplish. Bullying tends to be apparently an immature defense mechanism to try to protect the self rather than actually looking at reality. Now, interesting thing, if we actually go back to the definition, they tend to look for someone who they perceive as vulnerable. So the victims that bullies tend to look at, the bully sees them as potentially vulnerable. Now, that's a big thing because what it's telling you is the bully is a coward. they're not going to look at someone who is stronger than they are. They're not going to look at someone who's maybe in their same level. They're going to look at someone who they feel they can potentially get away with doing this. So, for instance, if you have a high school bully, he's not going to go and try to get someone who's stronger than him or his age. Usually, the high school bully will go for someone younger, and that is one of the big things. Now, there are a lot of different types of bullying, and I will mention that. I have talked mostly about high school because and junior high, elementary school, because that's pretty much, or racism, that's pretty obvious stuff. But there are different types of bullying that people talk about. One of them is the internet bullying, the cyberbullying. And again, these are, a lot of times, the bullying are looking for people they find vulnerable. Now, again, interesting thing is some of the people who are bullies don't see themselves as bullies. They see themselves as protecting someone else. And a lot of times I tell people, if you're trying to protect someone, make sure that the person you're trying to protect is actually worth protecting. And it's actually one of the things that is important. They are looking for someone who is vulnerable. So they're not going to look for someone who's can say, hey, look, I can back up what I say because of different things. They'll actually look for someone who they'll be able to intimidate to be able to come out of it. Now, with cyberbullying, you have something else that's kind of interesting. And you do have it in other aspects of bullying, which is the mob bullying. Now, mob bullying works like this. Maybe someone does something to, let's say, person A does something to person B. And person B belongs to a big group. So person B may actually say one or two things about person A, but the entire group that person B is part of will then come and attack the vulnerable person A. So that's actually another type of bullying. It's actually a mobbing. You don't just have one person. It's not the fair fight. It's not a lot of times even based on what someone can prove or not. It usually becomes personal. And it's in many ways seen kind of like a beatdown. As we get older, there is actually a couple other types of bullying. And one of the other types of bullying that I've seen is bullying within families. Now, again, what a lot of times happens is they're trying to the bully's trying to seek to do harm, intimidate, or coerce. They're trying to get something. And within families, sometimes I've seen people who will be pushed by other family members to do something, and because they're vulnerable. They actually are the person who, well, everyone drops their stuff on them because they are the one that everyone's always dropped the stuff on. Now, I actually will be honest, within my family, I have a brother and sister. I have never felt like I was the one they bullied. Sometimes I wonder if I'm the one who bullied them. And if I was, I always apologize to them. I really have a great brother and sister too. It's one thing I always like to mention. But that's actually one of the big things with bullying is they're looking for someone who's vulnerable. That's why, by the way, those of us who teach martial arts, we may notice that a lot of our students, after a while, don't get bullied. I talked to a couple of my students who have actually who have grown up with me since they were young, and asked them about bullying. And a couple of them said, "No, I've never been bullied before in my life. I've seen people bully, and it usually is something bad, and I can say something to stop it while I'm there, but I know that as the minute I turn around, it goes back to happening." One of the kids who actually I talked about bullying, he says he's never been bullied before, but him and his friends do tend to throw jabs at each other all the time, and he said it's not really bullying because we're all at the same level. And so there's a lot of things that are actually aspects of bullying, and one of the ones that is probably the most dangerous as you get older is what they call workplace bullying. The reason is there's really no laws on it, and as long as you fear for losing your job, you are technically vulnerable to being coerced. What I mean by that is this. I really wasn't vulnerable to this because I didn't care. But I was working at a place, at university at one point, where someone actually told me that they wanted me to get rid of the copyrights on works that I had actually done. They wanted me to put their name on it too. And when I said no, they told me, well, I don't want you giving these things to the students. So I said, okay. Instead, I put it online. I told the students where to find it and called it a day. Eventually, I didn't want to work with this person, and I felt that the department really didn't care. So I just walked away. And so like I said, that's actually one thing I was able to do. But there are people who this person probably has bullied, and they pretty much weren't able to do anything but take it. Well, I hope this actually covers a lot of information. My laundry's just done. And I did, if you notice, I did talk a lot in 20 minutes. I did talk about the types of bullies, the bully, and victims, and how we, and one of the big things that keeps someone from being a victim, which is understanding that you are strong enough not to need to take a lot of the bullying. For instance, if you're online and you are actually being bullied by someone online, you can actually hide whatever they say. You can unfollow them, and if they want to continue talking, well, all you have to do is, you know, it's no skin off my back if someone wants to talk bad about me. That's up to them. And I guess one of the things some people say is all publicity is good publicity, right? So if they are talking bad about you, it may be a good thing. Now, I actually did get a book recently, and I'll mention it once I actually read. So just wanted to actually mention that. I hope you enjoy this and have a nice day. What do you think?